All right, so now that we've got the Stripe payment form working to the point where it gets the token from the payment form, which is really adding a card number. That's really all it's doing. It's not actually running a payment form at all. So submit payment is just for the end user. We haven't actually submitted anything yet because all we've really done is grab the credit card. So when we printed it out right here, that is just representative of the credit card. So on our back end, so what we do on what's called the server side, which is this stuff, this is where we'll actually create the transaction to happen, right? So if it's sent, then we can run through here. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump into the Stripe API reference. So the documentation here, make sure you've got Python clicked over here, otherwise this will look a little different. And now what we want to do is a couple things when it relates to Stripe. Now, first of all, we want to make sure that Stripe's installed on our computer, or at least the Python package is installed. So in our virtual environment, we'll do pip freeze. And we did this a while ago, but I just want to make sure that it is installed, and it is. So I'm going to run the server again. And now I'm going to go into our view and import Stripe. It's technically a third-party package, so it doesn't necessarily have to be up there with the Python package. Probably more realistically be right above the Django package. That works right there. Okay, so now we want to actually set Stripe. And what we want to do too is we want to get the Stripe secret key. So Stripe secret. And we're going to get the Stripe secret key here. So going into our settings, go down and grab this. And you might be wondering, why do I have both of these in the same try and exception block? Because if neither one is in there, then we want to raise an exception. And that's just as simple as it goes. So now, going back into the API documentation, what we'll see here is authentication. In Stripe.api key is how you actually authenticate. So we've already imported it. So all I have to do now is Stripe.api key equals to Stripe secret. There we go. So now we have Stripe connected, which is good. And so a couple more things that we'll need to do is, first off, we'll look at customers. And we already have a customer created. So we have this ID right here as far as the customer object is concerned. So what we need to do is retrieve a customer. And if we look at this, we've got the import the Stripe API key and then find a customer based off of this. Now, the reason we don't have to create a customer is because we do that when the customer is created in Django. We do that automatically, right? If you remember back, that's what we do. And there's a reason for it, is to make this process nice and easy for us. So now, in here, we're going to say customer equals to Stripe.customer.retrieve. And then we want to get the Stripe ID from our requested user. Now, if we look into our accounts, and we got user Stripe here, we have this one-to-one field. So what we can do back in our views is we can actually do user Stripe equals to request.user.userstripe.stripe ID. And we're going to retrieve that user Stripe. So now I'm just going to do print customer. And I want to just talk about this real quick. Request.user is the authenticated user. They have to be authenticated because of this, right? And then the .user Stripe is going to be getting their model user Stripe. And then user Stripe has a field in there called Stripe ID. And that is what is going on right here. So this is the model that user is associated to, and it's getting its Stripe ID. Now, we could say that there's an error, so we might want to say try, put this into a try block, and say except. And I'm just going to say pass for now. Because if there is an error getting the customer, then perhaps we want to say that in some form or fashion. Because if they don't have for some reason they don't have a Stripe ID, then we might want to actually run some sort of alert when they get here. and saying there's an error with your account, please contact us, something like that. But the way we have it set up right now, there shouldn't be any errors, right? It should be work just fine unless we manually delete the Stripe ID itself, which is something we won't want to do. So we will keep that in mind when we go forward. All right, so now we've got this ID. So let's actually just try it out. Let's go into the store, and we're going to print out the customer object related to this Stripe ID, right? So we should see some sort of customer object here when we actually submit the form. So 4242, 1, 2, 3, 4, CVC, some date that hasn't expired, hit submit payment. Oh, looks like I put too many 42s there. 1, 2, 3, 4, submit payment, and it went through. So now we don't see a customer ID actually coming through here. So let's see what's going on. We might actually have to put it into a string. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it in here. So again, with those try blocks, sometimes they don't work the way we want them to. So 4242, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and some date. Hit submit payment, and I spelled retrieve wrong. There we go. An easy way, of course, would be to just literally copy from their code. But, you know, those little spelling errors happen a lot, at least for me. So let's go back. I'm going to hit submit, and it looks like it went through. And here's our Stripe customer account here, if we see this, which is great. So it's showing that we have cards being nothing, right? So once we actually add this card, it'll be more than nothing. And then we have all this other stuff. Great. So now that we have this submit payment button, let's actually go ahead and create a card for this customer based off of this Stripe token. So let's go into the API keys. And what we want to do here is click card, and we're going to create a new card. And notice it says right here, it says customer cards create, and then card equals to the token. It's fairly easy, right? So that actually creates the card for us. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we're going to go in here, and we'll say just this right here. I'll also do customer equals to none, and then down here after the try block we'll say if customer is not none, then we'll do this, and we'll say token equals to that. Put this token in the place of that, quotes, right there. There we go. So now we've got the Stripe ID, we've got the customer, we've got a card, and now we're actually going to create that card, which is great. So now we actually want to get the order, and the order like cost and price and all that stuff. That's something that we'll actually have to do. So looking at our order, this is giving us our order object right here. So new order is going to be the total that we're actually going to end up charging. So let's actually go up to charges, and we're going to be creating a new charge here. So we've got stripe.charge.create. So let's go ahead and copy this. And right after customer create, customer create cards right here, I'm going to just press enter a few times. And I'm going to tab this stuff in. So it says stripe.charge.create. Now we've got an amount here. We'll just leave it at 400 for now, and we'll just see what happens. Currency, we've got US dollars. Card is going to be the card that we're using. So the create card. So we'll just say card equals to that. And then I'll go ahead and copy this and paste it here. And so let's see a couple things here. So we've got card and customer. So these are attributes or arguments that we can add in here. Amount is required, currency is required, then customer or card, those two are optional. Right? So if we get customer, we would use the ID of customer, or if we use card, we use the card. You can also pass a customer ID as it says, the card of the ID of a card. The card must be the ID of a card belonging to the customer, right? So if we do not pass a customer the card you must be either be a token or a dictionary. All right, so what that means is we can use this card as it is right here, or instead we could use customer equals to customer. And since this customer, we just created a new card for it, we might want to keep that card as the initial default, because if we create a new card and that customer has a different default, then this might run into an issue because there's a default on the actual side of Stripe. So if I scroll down a little bit or go back to cards, sorry, and we look at create a new card, we have, sorry, not card, but customers. If we scroll down to update a customer, we'll see that there's a card and then there's also default card. Now, adding in the card itself, a brand new one, will often create it as the default, but it's not necessarily going to happen that way, right? So you want to keep that in mind when you're actually running this transaction. So we created a card and we associate it to the customer, but if the customer already has a default, then we're going to run into an error here with just charging the customer. At least on the customer side, it'll be an error. The transaction might go through, but on the customer side, it might be an error. So what I'm going to do here is just do card as card. I'm going to keep them both and make sure that this transaction runs through. And then I'll just say charge equals 4, and I'll just do %s, and I'll say %request.user.username. Right, so charge for the username, and we've got an amount and charge and all that stuff. Okay, so that's what we want to see. And then let's actually take a look at charges again. And once we create a charge, so this is the object that we'll get back, is you'll say the card, so the card itself, and whether it's not refunded, currency, the amount, if it's been paid, if it was done doing in a test or doing when it's live, if it's been created, refunds, and then balance transaction, all this other stuff that will actually come through with that. That will happen here. So let's go ahead and actually run this transaction now. I'm going to go back into the checkout. So we haven't done a few things here. We just created the card, but we haven't actually seen what happens when we create the card yet. And then we've created a charge as well. So I'm going to just call this charge equals to that, and then print. We're going to print card, and then we're going to print charge. And I'm going to get rid of the print customer for now. So print card and print charge. So now that we've got this, let's go ahead and do 4242. Copy that a couple times. Do a CVC number, a expiration, hit submit payment, and it's going to take a second, right? Because we just actually ran the transaction. So if I go into the terminal, I see that we've got a few things here. So the first one is card. We don't have address, any of the address stuff in here related to this card whatsoever yet. We don't have the dynamic last 4 is not there, but the last 4 digits is. And then we've got a fingerprint, funding, all this stuff. Okay, great. Now if we scroll one more down, we see the amount. It was charged, captured, yes, so it was successful. It shows the actual card. It shows the customer. It says the same account, the ID from the card, so we could check that by scrolling up. It's 14WIT, and then 114WIT, perfect. Created when it was created, customer, charge for J Mitchell 3, perfect. All this stuff works out very well. Okay, great. So that means that our transaction actually worked. So let's actually look into Stripe, and I'm already still up with this customer. So if I refresh in here, and refreshing, we see that we've got a payment of $4, and then we've got a Visa card here, $219. That's the default. Perfect. So it actually worked, right? So that card, that transaction was actually successful. It did run. So let's go ahead and look at the transaction response again. And what I want to do now is see if captured is true. So what I want to do is go in here and say if charge captured, and it's sending JSON data, so we will see if it actually converts it to being true. Print charged. And then now we also want to get the order itself, and we want to get the total for that order. So let's do a quick refresher on the order itself. So if we jump into the model, we see final total here. So that's the number that we'll want. And then if we actually look into our carts themselves, so if we go into admin or the orders themselves, and we see, say, the most recent order, it's $10.99. Okay, so that I do not believe is the correct amount, but let's figure it out by actually adding some stuff in here. And I'll go product, it's $29.99, add to cart. Now this is our cart. We have $179. Go to checkout, and then let's go and check out our admin orders. I believe it's the same order right here. Yeah, so that's not actually updating our prices yet. That's okay, so we'll do that in the next one. And then we've got in our checkout, I want to actually put the order price in here somewhere. So I'm just going to put it right above current addresses. Current total is equal to, we want to say order dot final total. So in our views, it's going to be new order, and context, we'll just call it order equals to new order. All right, so back into our cart, or excuse me, our checkout. Checkout, we've got or current total is $10.99. It looks like I did not close off something in the HTML. I did not close off that H1 tag. Okay. So now we have current total being $10.99. That's not the correct amount, which we'll figure that out shortly, but or in the next video. But we do want to actually at least charge that amount. So let's go ahead and go into our views. And so now we've got this new order. Notice 400 was actually what was charged, right? So that means, or excuse me, $4 was charged. That means it's actually charging it like that. So whatever we end up charging, we need to multiply by 100. So new order dot final total, and we want to charge this or multiply this by 100, and I'm going to do or just 100 right there. So that's going to give us a new total. So now this next charge that we do is going to be for $10.99. So we'll do 42.42, copy and paste this a few times, CVC 04 2019, submit payment. It's loading. We've got some stuff going on. Invalid integer. Okay, so it won't take a float number at all. So we actually need to convert this into an integer. So I can just do int of this number right here. Okay, so let's go back to our checkout, and I'll do 42, copy and paste that a couple times, CVC, and there we go, hit submit payment. It's loading. Of course, there's other stuff that we'll want to do for that. Looks like it went through, so let's go ahead and check out our charges for this customer. And we've got $10.99. And what we notice is that first card that we added is now the default. Any card after that is no longer the default. But if I click on the payment itself, it'll show the correct card, right? So this is $12.19. That's what we added just now. And then if we did a different card or a different transaction, so I ran it again, and we see that it says $12.19. So that would be if we ran that transaction without actually selecting a card, because we could still run a transaction without selecting a card as far as Stripe is concerned. Now on our side, we will want them to always select a card of some kind. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a default card in the next one. Or actually, we're first going to update how orders work, and then we'll start doing default card stuff. But what we have done is actually charged the order itself as far as the current total is concerned. We've actually charged that account, and it has actually worked. So we're basically right almost there. Just a few other default things that we need to do before it's complete. All right, so we'll see you in the next one.